I work at a small seasonal decor store on a regular street, nothing fancy. We sell whatever fits the time of year. When the season changes, the inventory changes with it. Right now, it's Christmas. Every shelf is red and green. Lights, ornaments, plastic trees, boxes of things people only want for a few weeks and then forget about. I open in the morning. I sell through the day. And when the foot traffic slows down, I close. There's no night shift. No one stays late on purpose. Once customers stop coming in, we clean, shut things down, and go home. That's how it's always been. That first night felt no different. By the time the last customer left, the store already felt hollow. The music was still playing, but it didn't feel like it belonged to anyone anymore. I straightened a few shelves out of habit, picked up a fallen ornament, swept near the door, the kind of things you do when you're already thinking about being somewhere else. I turned off the lights in sections, the back first, then the middle. I left the front on just enough to see what I was doing. Before leaving, I walked back to the register to shut it down properly. I've learned not to skip that step. Machines remember things when people don't. The screen was still on. That wasn't strange by itself. Sometimes it takes a second. I tapped the side of the monitor and waited. Instead of going dark, the register refreshed. One transaction was still open, not frozen, not glitched, just sitting there, unfinished, an item list, a total, no payment logged. I stared at it longer than I meant to. I tried to remember the last customer. I could picture the flow of the day in pieces, a woman buying lights, a couple arguing quietly about ornaments, someone rushing in at the last minute, apologizing as they did. But no matter how I replayed it, I couldn't land on a final face. No clear ending. It annoyed me more than it worried me. I figured I'd bumped something earlier, maybe hit the wrong button, maybe the system didn't register a cancel. It happens when you're tired and the day's been long. The store had been busy all week. My head felt full in that dull, useless way it gets after too many small interactions. I didn't try to fix it. Not really. I told myself I'd deal with it in the morning, reset the register, clear the error. Whatever it wasn't worth staying longer over. As I reached for the power button, I paused, not because I felt scared, just because the store felt unusually quiet for a second, like it was holding a breath I hadn't noticed before. Still waiting. I didn't respond. I didn't look around. I shut the register down, turned off the last light, locked the door behind me, and went home, already thinking about something else. The store isn't meant to last the way other places do. That's something you learn quickly when you work there. We don't build familiarity with the shelves or the layout because it's all temporary. Everything has an expiration date baked into it. What's up this month will be gone the next. We don't ease into change, we replace it. Right now, it's Christmas. That means the aisles are narrow and crowded with things that shine under the lights, ornaments stacked too high, garlands coiled like they're waiting to be unrolled, boxes labeled with words like indoor, outdoor, fragile, battery-operated. None of it feels permanent. It feels borrowed. After Christmas, all of it goes away. Some of it gets boxed and shipped out. Some of it gets marked down until it's not worth keeping. By January, the store will look like it never happened. Different colors, different music, different reasons for people to walk through the door. That impermanence makes the days blur together. I work the front. I ring people up, answer the same questions, repeat the same reassurances. Jordan handles the rest, stocking shelves, breaking down boxes, straightening things out when customers pick through piles and don't put them back. He's good at it, quick, quiet, used to the rhythm of short seasons and long weeks. Frank floats between the office and the back. He keeps track of inventory, signs off on deliveries, and makes sure nothing important is missing at the end of the day. He leaves when the work is done. Always has. There's no reason for him to stay longer. The store doesn't ask for that kind of loyalty. Most days follow the same pattern. The music starts when the lights come on and doesn't stop until we shut everything down. The same handful of holiday songs, spaced out just enough that you forget what you've already heard. By the afternoon, it all blends together into a soft, constant noise. Not loud enough to be annoying, not quiet enough to escape. The decorative lights stay on all day. There's no point turning them off. They're part of the product. Customers want to see how things glow, how they reflect, how they'll look in a living room that isn't this one. By evening, the store feels warmer than it should, like the lights are holding on to heat they don't need. People rush more as the days get closer to the holiday. You can feel it in the way they move. Less browsing, more grabbing. They come in with lists, with deadlines, with a sense that time is slipping. Some of them apologize for being late. Some of them don't say anything at all. They just hurry. That kind of pace wears on you in small ways. A receipt printed once without anyone standing at the counter. It slid out halfway and stopped, the paper curling under its own weight. I tore it off and glanced at it. An item code, a partial total. Nothing finished. I assumed Jordan had hit the button by mistake while passing by. I threw it away. The door chime rang once while the store was empty. I looked up out of reflex, already reaching for the practiced greeting. No one was there. The door hadn't moved. I told myself it was the wind or the sensor misfiring. Those things need recalibrating more often than people think. The barcode scanner let out a single beep while I was wiping down the counter. No item, no trigger, just the sound. I unplugged it and plugged it back in. It stayed quiet after that. None of it stood out on its own. Not really. Machines get tired the same way people do. They glitch under constant use. Buttons stick. Sensors drift. During the holidays, everything gets pushed harder than it's meant to be. Longer days, more hands, less patience. It's easy to believe small errors are just part of that. Jordan didn't seem bothered. He kept moving, kept stacking, kept breaking down cardboard until the pile by the back door got too big to ignore. Frank checked his clipboard, nodded to himself, and disappeared into the office to finish his paperwork. This season always messes with the equipment. It was the kind of thing people say without thinking. A filler sentence, something to explain away a dozen minor inconveniences at once. It didn't mean anything. I nodded and went back to what I was doing. By the time evening rolled around, the store would thin out the way it always did. Fewer footsteps, longer gaps between customers. The music would feel louder because there was nothing else competing with it. We'd start the slow process of putting the day away. Straighten, sweep, shut down. That's the part I liked, the transition, the moment when the store stopped being a place people wanted things from and started being a room again, a quiet one, a temporary one. Nothing about it felt wrong. Not yet. If anything, it felt familiar in a comforting way, like the end of a long sentence you've said too many times. You don't think about the words anymore. You just know how it's supposed to end. And most days, it did. The second night of the week always feels easier. People get their shopping done early if they can, leaving the middle days lighter and less frantic. I felt that as soon as I unlocked the door that morning. The store never relaxes, not fully, but there's a tone to the day you can sense before anything actually happens. A quieter kind of urgency. Fewer hands grabbing, more hands comparing, that sort of thing. By the time we hit the afternoon rush, the routine had taken over the way it always does. Jordan stocked the front table with fresh boxes of ornaments while I handled the register. Frank drifted between tasks, leaving notes on clipboards and making half-finished comments about supply shipments that never seemed to concern me directly. Nothing about the day stood out enough to hang on to. Everything was predictable, temporary, and headed toward its inevitable end. The sun fades fast in winter, and the windows darkened earlier than I expected. The overhead lights did most of the work after that. They reflected off the tinsel and shiny plastic surfaces, turning the aisles into soft, blurry tunnels of color. When it's busy, you don't notice it. When things slow down, it starts to feel like the store is glowing from the inside out. People trickled out in that drifting, uneven way shoppers do near close. No last-minute panics, no angry questions about sold-out items, just the slow easing of a day that had done enough. Jordan swept up stray bits of garland. Frank shut the office door and told us not to forget to lock the receiving bay. The usual checklist, the usual tone. Nothing unusual. Not yet. We finished cleaning faster than the night before. Everything went smoothly. Floors clear, displays reset, stray items returned to wherever they belonged. Jordan pushed the last ladder to the back wall and wiped his hands on his jeans. I remember thinking we might actually leave early for once. You can feel a good ending approaching before it arrives. I walked to the register out of habit. I didn't expect anything. I didn't even think about the unfinished transaction from the previous night until after I hit the button to wake the screen. It didn't flicker, it didn't stutter, it didn't load slowly. It just came on instantly like it had been waiting. One transaction, unpaid, open. Same placement on the screen, same category of items, holiday decor. Nothing special, nothing expensive, nothing worth remembering. A few seasonal pieces that wouldn't matter to anyone after the week was over. I stood perfectly still for a moment, like my body needed time to decide how to respond. Not fear, just something more solid than confusion. A delayed recognition that the familiar shape of the error was now something else. Jordan walked past behind me, dragging a trash bag toward the receiving bay. "Machine actin' dumb again," he muttered, less to me than to the air. It wasn't a question. He didn't look at the screen. I clicked out of the window, expecting the register to kick me back to the main menu. It didn't. The same page returned. Same total, same blank payment line. The cursor blinked at the bottom right corner, waiting for a response I didn't want to give. I checked the receipt spool on instinct. It hadn't printed anything. No partial slip. No half-cut tape, nothing to suggest someone had started a purchase and walked away. It was like the system had drawn the transaction out of thin air. I told myself it was because holiday inventory codes were messy. They changed each year, reused old identifiers, piled seasonal tags on top of existing SKUs. Maybe the system held on to something from an earlier batch. Maybe a delivery scan had gotten mixed into the register log. There were dozens of explanations if I wanted them. And I did want them. Because the only alternative was to believe the error wasn't accidental. I closed the window again. Slower this time. Waiting to see what it would do. It refreshed immediately. Same transaction. Same silent persistence. Not aggressive, not alarming. Just undeniably present. Jordan came back to the front, rolling his shoulders like he was done for the day. He didn't notice the screen. He didn't notice me staring at it. He just reached for the light switch behind the counter and paused. "You good?" he asked lightly. A normal question. A casual one. I almost answered, but the instinct faded before I spoke. There was nothing worth saying. "I'm fine," would have been a lie. And anything else would have sounded ridiculous. I shut the register drawer a little harder than necessary. The sound echoed more sharply than I expected, bouncing off the holiday decor like it didn't have enough surfaces to absorb it. That was when I heard it again. Not a voice rising, not a voice moving, just a voice existing in the exact location where a whisper shouldn't be. Right behind me, right beside me, right inside the moment I didn't want to acknowledge. "It's not paid." 3 words, soft, precise, like a reminder meant only for the person already looking at the mistake. I didn't turn. I didn't ask Jordan if he heard it. I didn't call out. There was no need to. The words weren't for him. My pulse didn't jump. My breath didn't catch. Fear didn't arrive the way stories say it should. The feeling was closer to irritation than anything else, like being tapped on the shoulder when you're trying to leave and someone insists you forgot something that wasn't your responsibility to begin with. I pressed the power button. My finger hovered for a second longer than usual, not because of hesitation, but because I wanted to be sure the machine would actually turn off this time. The screen dimmed slowly, almost reluctantly. Jordan locked the front door. I heard the bolt slide into place, followed by the soft click of the handle settling, the everyday sounds of closing up. Normal sounds. But there was a different texture to the silence that followed. Not heavier, not darker, just more aware of itself, like the store understood we were leaving something undone. We stepped outside, and the cold hit the space between my collar and my neck. I focused on that instead of the nagging sensation that something behind me wasn't finished. The sidewalk was empty. A single passing car hummed somewhere down the block. The glow from the street lamps turned the snow on the curb into a dull yellow. Nothing unusual, nothing that connected to what had happened inside. We walked without talking. Jordan didn't bring it up. I didn't either. The night felt typical in every way except for one, the sense that the store wasn't done with me yet. Not in a dramatic way, not in a haunted way. Just in the quiet, procedural way something might insist you come back because the shift isn't officially over. Seasonal items don't mean much on their own. They're temporary by design. They fill shelves until the shelves need to be filled with something else. But when I thought about the open transaction sitting there for the second night in a row, a small detail lodged itself into place. Those items wouldn't exist here after Christmas. Whatever the register was asking for, it had a deadline, a short one. We turned the corner and split off in opposite directions. Jordan didn't look concerned. I didn't look back. The day had ended. The store was closed. Everything should have been over. But as I walked home, the open transaction lingered behind my thoughts with the same flat persistence as the whisper. Not dangerous, not threatening, just wrong. Wrong in a way that waits for you to return so it can show you it's still there. And we left again, just like nothing had happened. The last night before Christmas always feels heavier, even before anything goes wrong. It starts early in the day, in small ways, people moving faster, questions coming sharper, the kind of restless energy that builds up when everyone in the city realizes they're almost out of time. By evening, the store felt swollen with it. A kind of pressure, not loud enough to call stressful, but present enough that it kept me from drifting into autopilot the way I usually did. Frank made one last pass through the aisles, checking his clipboard against what we had left on the shelves. His pace was quicker than usual, his notes shorter. He was already mentally out the door. Seasonal managers think in cycles, not moments. The second the rush is done, they're thinking about the return bins in the next season's layout. He said something about needing to drop paperwork off on his way home, gave us a distracted wave, and left before the final customer even stepped out. Jordan and I kept the place upright. People trickled in well past when they normally would have stopped coming. Every time I thought the flow had finally ended, the bells on the door would ring again, and someone would rush in with the posture of a person who had just remembered a promise they forgot they made. I didn't mind. Sales were sales. But each interruption pushed the evening further, stretching the space where "we're almost done" was supposed to fit. By the time the last customer left, the store felt like it had been wrung out. The lights over the display wall flickered the way they sometimes did after too many hours. Heat from the decorative bulbs pressed gently against my face. Glitter coated the counter in a way that made it look like the night had left fingerprints everywhere. Jordan dragged the trash bag to the back while I started resetting the shelves. My body felt tired in the ordinary way, the predictable way, but something underneath that familiar fatigue felt different. Not anxiety, not dread, just an awareness that the night was trying to swerve out of routine, and I was trying not to notice. Cleanup took too long, or maybe it didn't. Maybe it simply refused to end at the pace I expected. We finished sweeping. We straightened the garland table. We boxed a set of damaged lights someone had returned too aggressively. We did everything that marks the end of the shift. And yet nothing felt finished. I didn't realize how late it had gotten until I looked up and saw the reflection of the overhead lights stretching across the front windows, like they were trying to escape. The street outside looked emptier than usual. Snow drifted in slow, directionless movements beneath the lamp on the corner. The quiet pressed against the glass. I walked to the counter to shut down the register, moving slower than I needed to. Part of me already knew what I'd see. Part of me still hoped I'd be wrong. The screen came on instantly. No hesitation, no load-in delay. The same unpaid transaction appeared as if it had never left. The total, the item list, the seasonal stock that wouldn't matter after midnight. I exhaled once through my nose, more irritation than anything else. My hand hovered above the cancel button. The receipt printer activated before I touched anything. It chirped, it whirred, it spit out a blank strip of paper 3 inches long and then stopped like it had changed its mind mid-thought. I stared at it. Jordan stared at me. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't need to. Before either of us moved, something shifted in aisle 3, a soft clatter, then another, then the unmistakable slide of ornaments rolling off a slanted surface. We turned at the same time. A string of lights near the floor uncoiled itself and dragged across the aisle like someone had pulled it slowly, deliberately. Jordan stepped forward to lift it, but it slid farther out of reach, tightening around one of the metal stands as if the air itself had snagged it. He bent down again. This time the light slipped around his ankle and looped once before he even reacted, not tight enough to trip him, just enough to hold his attention. He shook it off, muttered something under his breath, and stood straighter than before. His posture wasn't fear. It was confusion smoothed over by habit. The kind of reaction people have when they're trying to be efficient, despite something refusing to cooperate. We both turned when the shelf near the front counter groaned, not loudly, not sharply, just enough for the wood to complain. The structure leaned forward half an inch, then a full inch. Not tipping, shifting. Every object on it rolled toward the side facing the register, ornaments collected like marbles drifting toward a drain. Jordan took a step back. His movement matched mine without planning. The shelf stopped moving, not abruptly, just as if it had reached the correct position and no longer needed to exert itself. I looked back at the register. The screen was still lit, still waiting. A pulse of cold air pressed against the back of my neck. Not a draft, not a temperature change, just the kind of cold that feels aware of where you are standing. Then the whisper came. Not near my shoulder this time, not behind me, not from any direction I could name. It came from the moment itself, like it rose from the unfinished transaction on the screen. Finish it. Not angry, not urgent, just instructional. Jordan inhaled sharply, but didn't speak. He still didn't understand what was happening, and I didn't have the ability to explain a thing I didn't understand either. I reached for the front door, out of instinct more than intention. My hand wrapped around the metal handle. I pushed. It didn't move. I pulled. It didn't move. The lock was disengaged. I could feel it. This wasn't the resistance of a latched mechanism. This was a door that refused to be a door. The glass trembled under my palm, not because of anything I did, but because something on the other side refused the idea of leaving. Jordan tried the emergency back exit. I heard the thud from where I stood, the sound of a door meeting the certainty of a force that didn't belong to a building code. We met each other's eyes for a moment. It wasn't fear I saw in his expression. It was the realization that we were stuck in place for a reason neither of us could name. Something fell in aisle 5. A box of tree toppers toppled forward, spreading across the floor in a scattered, shimmering mess. The pattern of the mess pointed toward the register, not toward us, toward the counter, like everything else, like the whole store was being nudged into alignment around one unfinished task. I walked back to the register because my body decided before my mind did. Jordan stayed behind me, but not close. He wasn't following. He was choosing the safest distance between understanding and denial. The register screen didn't blink. It didn't glitch. It didn't shift. It waited. The total remained the same. The item list remained the same. The missing payment line remained empty. The room around me trembled softly, not shaking, just repositioning, as if the entire store inhaled and asked a single question without sound. I didn't answer it out loud. Another whisper slid into the space beside me. Pay. A single word, cold, flat, non-emotional. Jordan flinched but didn't speak. Something inside me recognized the inevitability of the moment before I consciously did. We were not trapped because it was late. We were trapped because the day wasn't allowed to end. Not yet. Not with one thing incomplete. I reached toward the register. My hand shook, not with fear but with exhaustion and the faint surrender of someone who understands that resistance is pointless in the face of a task that refuses to expire. My fingertip hovered above the first item on the screen. A garland, a pack of bulbs, a ceramic figure, all seasonal, all temporary, all meaningless to anyone except the system insisting they mattered. Behind me, something slid across the floor with a soft scrape. Maybe a decoration, maybe a box, maybe the entire store shifting its weight. Jordan whispered something too quiet for meaning. A single syllable. Maybe my name, maybe nothing. I touched the screen. The register beeped, not loudly but firmly, the way a machine acknowledges a command it has been waiting too long to receive. The sound echoed in the store like a breath finally exhaled. The lights above us flickered once, shelves settled. The exit door gave a soft metallic groan as if the pressure on it had eased. But the screen didn't move to the next step. It wanted more. It wanted completion. It wanted closure. And it wasn't finished. Not yet. Not until I understood what had to happen next. The shift wasn't over. The night wasn't allowed to end. And whatever was waiting inside that unfinished transaction wasn't done with me. The moment I touched the first item on the screen, the pressure in the store changed. Not like air shifting or temperature dropping, more like a room exhaling after holding itself too still for too long. The lights steadied. The faint trembling in the shelves faded. Even the sounds from outside, the distant cars and muffled wind, felt like they returned on a delay, as if the building had been muting them without meaning to. I kept my hand on the register longer than I meant to. Not because I was afraid to pull away, but because the calm that followed felt conditional, like something had paused only because I was standing exactly where I was supposed to be. When I moved my hand back an inch, something behind me clicked. A soft tightening of space, not threatening, just a reminder. I placed my hand back on the edge of the screen. The tension eased instantly. That was the first time I understood the rule. The store didn't care about us. It cared about the position I occupied. Jordan didn't say anything. He didn't have to. He hovered near aisle 2, arms crossed loosely against his chest, eyes moving between me and the nearest shelf like he was preparing for the room to shift again. He wasn't panicking. He was waiting for an instruction he couldn't put into words. I tapped the first item on the register. The machine beeped, clear, accepting, not cheerful, just correct. Nothing in the store moved. I tapped the second item. Another beep, another moment of stillness. The list wasn't long, a few holiday pieces, seasonal junk that would be irrelevant after tonight. But each confirmation felt like pushing a stone into the right slot, something aligning inside a mechanism I didn't fully see. As I tapped the third item, I felt a thought rise, not forced, not implanted, just obvious in a way I hadn't let myself admit. Everything only escalated when I stepped away. Not when Jordan moved, not when Frank moved, only when I did, only when I tried to leave early, only when the day wasn't closed correctly. The store, or whatever threaded itself through its routines, wasn't punishing us. It wasn't demanding attention. It wasn't even trying to scare us. It behaved the same way a machine behaves when someone tries to shut it down mid-process. A gentle mechanical insistence, not a cry for help. I tapped the next item. Beep. I could feel Jordan's breathing change behind me. Not faster, not louder, just more intentional, like he was bracing for something he couldn't see. He took a small step closer but didn't cross whatever invisible boundary the store had drawn around the counter. I scanned the final item. The last beep landed with a sort of finality, though nothing obvious changed. The register updated. The total displayed again. The empty payment line waited. I stared at the number. It wasn't much. It wasn't nothing either. Logically, none of this should have worked. There was no card. There was no customer. There was no purchase attached to a person or a moment. It didn't matter. I opened the cash drawer. The mechanism slid out without resistance, smooth and calm, like it knew exactly what step came next. The compartments were neat, organized, settled. They always were at the end of the day. Bills stacked, coins sorted, everything in its place. My wallet felt heavier than it should have when I pulled it out. I hesitated, not because I objected to the idea, but because of the absurdity of it. Paying for items no one bought, paying for a transaction that didn't exist, paying because the store was waiting for a step to be done, and I was the only one standing here to perform it. I took out a few bills. Not enough, not the right combination, not the correct value. But that wasn't the point. I placed the money into the drawer. As soon as my hand left the last bill, the register chimed. A soft, low acceptance tone. Not the usual end-of-sale beep. Something quieter, more final. The total on the screen faded. The empty payment line filled itself with a confirmation symbol that didn't match any system I'd seen. The entire transaction collapsed into the archive. Jordan let out a sound. Not a word, not a sigh, something in between. As I pushed the drawer closed, his posture loosened in small increments, like his muscles had been held taut without him knowing. The store remained still, no shelves shifting, no ornaments rolling, no lights twitching, no pressure on the door. Everything was normal. More normal than it had been in days. But I understood something then. Something I didn't want to shape into a sentence, but couldn't avoid. It didn't want harm. It didn't want notice. It wanted procedure, completion. The end of the day done correctly. Whatever moved through the store didn't care about humans or their fear or their schedules. It cared about unfinished routines, something left open, a task left dangling across the boundary where a season turns into another. As I slid the register screen toward shutdown, a final whisper leaked into the air, not closer, not louder, just present. Complete. Not a command, not a threat, a statement. I didn't respond. The screen dimmed. The hum of the machine quieted. For the first time in 3 nights, nothing pulled at me when I stepped away. Jordan didn't look back toward the aisles. I didn't look toward the door. We didn't need to. We both knew the shift was over, not because of the time, not because of the routine, but because something in the store accepted that the work was finished and no longer needed us. When I reached the front door, the handle turned easily under my hand. The cold outside felt cleaner than it should have, brushing against my skin in a way that made the last few minutes feel distant. Not unreal, just complete. Jordan walked out first. He didn't talk. He didn't ask questions. We didn't try to fill the silence with anything. The closing ritual had been done correctly. The store had been allowed to end. That was enough. The lights inside glowed through the window in their regular, untroubled way. A place that looked like any other seasonal shop in a city full of them. Temporary, harmless, forgettable. I didn't lock the door immediately. I watched the store for a moment longer, waiting for some sign that it wasn't finished after all. But nothing happened. Just the glow, just the lights. Just a perfectly normal store in its final hours before Christmas. I locked the door. We walked away. No victory, no triumph, no sense of surviving anything, just a compliance so mundane it felt like the natural punctuation of a task that had always been mine, even if I didn't understand why. The street felt open again. The cold didn't bite anymore. And for the first time since the week began, I wasn't thinking about the register, not because I'd forgotten, but because the store finally let me leave. The register stayed dark after the shutdown, and for a moment, I thought that was the end of it. A clean break. Silence settling into the store the way dust settles into untouched corners. Jordan stepped past me without speaking, heading toward the door with the kind of careful relief that doesn't want to draw attention to itself. I reached for the light switch behind the counter. That was when the receipt printer came alive. Not loudly, not urgently, just a single, steady whir, as if the machine had remembered one last requirement it hadn't completed. A slip fed out slowly, clean edges, no hesitation, no sputter of a jammed roll. It printed like it was following rules it had followed long before I ever worked there. When the strip reached its full length, the machine cut it with a neat click and fell silent. I didn't want to read it, but I didn't need to. The letters were bold, centered, plain. Receipt closed, nothing else. No date, no price, no item list. Just an ending the store had been waiting for. I let the paper hang between my fingers for a second before setting it on the counter. The air around me felt unburdened, like the building had exhaled something it had been holding since the season began. The hum in the walls disappeared. The lights steadied into their usual warm glow. The door opened without resistance when Jordan pulled it. No sound, no hesitation, just the ordinary click of metal giving way. He stepped outside first. He didn't look back. He didn't ask if I was coming. There was nothing left that required comment, nothing either of us could reshape into something logical. I followed him into the cold. The street outside hadn't changed. Same snow, same light on the corner, same quiet stretch of sidewalk. The world hadn't registered anything unusual happening a few feet behind us. I locked the door. The key turned easily. In the days that followed, I went back to work like always. Morning shifts, midday rushes, normal routines. Frank didn't mention anything out of place, and Jordan kept the aisles in order without any sign he remembered how the season had ended. But I didn't close the store again. Not once. Frank didn't ask why. I volunteered for morning prep, midday stocking, anything that kept me away from the last hour. Jordan took over evening duties without complaint. Maybe he understood. Maybe he didn't want to ask. Either way, the arrangement held. I avoided standing behind the register after sunset. I avoided touching the screen unless other people were around. I avoided being the one who shut down the counter, the lights, the day. Weeks passed. The store changed seasons. All the Christmas pieces vanished as if they'd never existed. And then, at a different shop entirely, while paying for something small, nothing important, I heard a beep from the register next to me. Not the normal tone, a slightly off one, a fraction too low, a fraction too late, a fraction too familiar. I didn't look over. I didn't have to. Whatever waits for things to be finished doesn't stay in one place. It stays in the process. And once you've heard it, you recognize the moment before it speaks.